The rain hammered against the windows of Mercy's diner like 1,000 desperate fingers seeking entry. It was the kind of November storm that turned the streets of Ashford into rivers, the kind that made even the hardiest souls think twice about venturing outside. But inside the diner, warmth bloomed from the ancient radiators, mixing with the smell of fresh coffee and pie that had been baking since 4 in the morning. Preparing and narrating this type of story takes a lot of time and effort. If you like the story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch every story of our channel, turn on the bell icon. Elena Morales moved between tables with the practiced grace of someone who had been doing this work for 15 years. Her sneakers, worn thin at the heels, squeaked slightly against the black and white checkered floor. The sound had become so familiar that she barely heard it anymore, just like she barely noticed the ache in her lower back or the way her fingers had gone numb from carrying too many plates at once. She was 38 years old, though most people guessed younger until they looked closely at the lines around her eyes. Those lines told stories of laughter, yes, but mostly of worry, of counting pennies at 3 in the morning, of choosing between paying the electric bill or buying her daughter new shoes, of smiling through exhaustion because tips were better when you smiled. "Refill, sweetheart?" she asked the trucker at table 7, already pouring before he could answer. He gruntled thanks, his attention fixed on the television mounted in the corner where a news anchor discussed stock markets and mergers Elena couldn't begin to understand. The bell above the door chimed, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain that sent napkins fluttering off the counter. Elena looked up, ready with her automatic greeting, but the words died on her lips. The man who entered was soaked to the bone. Water dripped from his navy peacoat, forming puddles on the welcome mat. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his face, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. There was something about the way he stood in the doorway, hesitating, as if he wasn't sure he belonged there. "Sit anywhere you like, Han," Elena called out. Her voice warmed despite her fatigue. "I'll be right with you." The man chose the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that Elena kept meaning to ask her boss to fix. He sat facing the wall, his shoulders hunched inward. Even from across the room, Elena could sense something broken about him. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water, making her way over. "Nasty night out there," she said, setting the water down. "You look like you could use something hot. Coffee? Soup?" The man didn't look up. His hands, she noticed, were trembling slightly. They were clean hands, manicured even, which was unusual for Mercy's diner. Most of their customers had working hands, calloused, oil-stained, honest hands that built things and fixed things. "Coffee," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a while. "Please." "You got it." Elena hesitated, something tugging at her instincts. "You okay, sweetheart? You need me to call someone?" He shook his head, still not meeting her eyes. "Just the coffee. Thank you." Elena returned with the pot, pouring carefully. The steam rose between them, and for just a moment, the man looked up. His eyes were dark brown, red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep or both. There was something familiar in them, something that made Elena's heart skip, though she couldn't say why. "Food?" she asked gently. "I don't have much money," he admitted, and the shame in his voice was palpable. Elena glanced around the diner. Old Joe was working the grill, his back to them. Martha, the other waitress, was busy with a family near the front. The manager wouldn't be in for another hour. "Tell you what," Elena said, lowering her voice. "We've got some soup from lunch service that's just going to get thrown out anyway, and I think there might be half a turkey sandwich back there with nobody's name on it. How does that sound?" The man's throat worked as he swallowed. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Elena smiled, and it was genuine. "We all need help sometimes. Lord knows I've been helped more times than I can count." When she brought the food, she also brought extra bread and made sure the portions were generous. The man ate slowly, methodically, like someone who had been hungry for a long time and was trying to make it last. Elena busied herself with other tables, but she kept an eye on him. There was a young couple at table 3, celebrating something, an anniversary maybe, or a new job. They couldn't stop holding hands, couldn't stop smiling at each other. Elena remembered being like that once with Miguel. Before the cancer. Before the medical bills that swallowed their savings and her dreams of going to nursing school. Before she became a widow at 33 with a 5-year-old daughter and a mountain of debt. "More coffee?" she asked the man in the corner booth, appearing beside him with the pot. This time he looked at her fully. Really looked at her. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that was almost unsettling. "You're very kind," he said. Do you work here every day?" 6 days a week," Elena said with a tired smile. "Been here 15 years. Started when I was pregnant with my daughter. Thought it would be temporary, you know? Just until we got on our feet." She laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. "Funny how temporary things become permanent." "Your daughter," the man said carefully. "How old is she now?" 20. Can you believe it? Studying accounting at community college. Works part-time at the library. Pride filled Elena's voice. "She's going to have a better life than I did. That's what matters." The man's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "You did that alone?" "My husband passed when she was little. Cancer." Elena said it matter-of-factly, the way you do when you've said it so many times the words have lost their sharp edges. "But we managed. We always manage." The bell above the door chimed again, and a group of construction workers came in, loud and hungry. Elena excused herself, diving back into the familiar rhythm of orders and service. She brought plates of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, refilled drinks, laughed at jokes she'd heard 100 times before. But she kept glancing at the corner booth, where the man sat nursing his coffee, lost in thoughts that seemed to weigh him down like stones. An hour passed. The construction workers left, the young couple left, the trucker paid his bill and headed back into the rain. The diner grew quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sizzle of the grill. Elena approached the corner booth again. "Can I get you anything else?" The man looked out the rain-streaked window. "Do you believe in second chances?" he asked suddenly. Elena considered the question. "I believe we get chances every day," she said. "Every morning we wake up is another chance to do better, be better. Whether they're second or third or 100th chances, I don't know. But I believe in them. Even when you've done something unforgivable?" "I don't know if anything's truly unforgivable," Elena said slowly. "I think it depends on what you do after, whether you try to make it right." The man nodded, absorbing this. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. Elena started to protest. She hadn't brought him a check, but he was pulling out a photograph, not money. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice shaking. He laid the photograph on the table. Elena leaned closer. It was old, the colors faded, the edges worn. It showed 2 children, a girl of about 8 and a boy of perhaps 6, standing in front of a Christmas tree. The girl had dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. The boy was missing his 2 front teeth, grinning wildly at the camera. "That's..." Elena's voice trailed off. Her hand went to her mouth. "That's me. That's me and Mateo," the man finished. His hands moved to his baseball cap and slowly he removed it. Elena's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. The face looking up at her was older, weathered by time and circumstance, but unmistakable. The same dark brown eyes. The same small scar above his right eyebrow where he'd fallen off his bike when he was 7. The same shape to his jaw, like their father's. "Mateo?" she whispered. "Mateo, is that really you?" Her brother. Her baby brother who she hadn't seen in 30 years, who had disappeared from the foster care system when he was 8 and she was 10, who she had searched for and grieved for and never stopped loving, sat before her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Elena, I'm so sorry. For everything. For leaving. For not finding you sooner. But Elena had already slid into the booth beside him, pulling him into her arms the way she used to when he had nightmares, when he was scared, when their mother's boyfriend had been drinking and they'd hidden in the closet together, counting each other's heartbeats until the danger passed. "You're here," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You're alive. You're here." They held each other while the rain continued its relentless drumming, and old Joe discreetly turned away, giving them privacy. Martha, who had come in from her smoke break, took one look at the scene and quietly started cleaning tables on the other side of the diner. When they finally pulled apart, Elena grabbed napkins from the dispenser, handing him a wad and using another to wipe her own face. "I thought you were dead," she said. "After you disappeared from the Hendersons' house, I tried to find you. For years I tried, but no one would tell me anything. They said it was confidential. They said." "I ran away," Mateo said. His voice was steadier now, but still thick with emotion. "The Hendersons were going to send me to a group home. They didn't want me anymore. I was too much trouble, too angry, too broken. So I ran. I was 8 years old and I ran." Elena's heart clenched. "Where did you go?" "I lived on the streets for a while. Then I met someone. An old man named Richard Chun who ran a restaurant in Chinatown. He found me sleeping in his alley, and instead of calling the cops, he brought me inside. Fed me. Let me sleep in the storage room." Mateo's eyes grew distant with memory. "He became my family. He taught me to cook, taught me about business, taught me that my past didn't have to define my future." "I'm so glad you had someone," Elena said, squeezing his hand. "I was so worried, so scared." "I wanted to find you," Mateo interrupted. "God, Elena, I wanted to, but I was terrified. I thought you'd be angry that I ran. I thought you'd blame me for us being separated. And then, as years went by, I thought you'd moved on, that you had a new life and wouldn't want some ghost from your past showing up." "Never," Elena said fiercely. "I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped hoping." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, the weight of 30 lost years hanging between them. "Richard died 5 years ago," Mateo continued. "He left me the restaurant. But by then, I'd already started expanding. One restaurant became 2, then 5, then 20. I had a gift for it, for knowing what people wanted, for creating spaces where they felt at home." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Ironic, isn't it? I never had a home, but I became an expert at creating them for others." Elena was starting to understand something, pieces clicking into place. "The restaurants, how many do you have now?" 347 locations across 12 countries, Mateo said quietly. "Chen's Table. Maybe you've heard of it." Elena's mouth fell open. Chen's Table was everywhere. There was one in the nice part of Ashford, the part where Elena never went because a single meal there cost more than she made in a day. They were famous for their fusion cuisine, their elegant atmospheres, their commitment to hiring people who needed second chances. That's you." Mateo nodded. "I'm a billionaire, Elena, several times over. And I've spent the last 5 years trying to find you." Elena couldn't process what she was hearing. Billionaire. The word seemed absurd in the context of Mercy's diner, with its cracked vinyl booths and flickering fluorescent lights. Her baby brother, the little boy she used to share her school lunch with because their mother forgot to pack his, was a billionaire. "I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "You've been looking for me for 5 years? I've been right here, in the same town where we grew up, in the same diner I've worked at since before you disappeared." Mateo's face crumpled with fresh pain. "That's what makes it worse. I hired investigators, spent millions on search firms, and they couldn't find you. Do you know why?" Elena waited, her heart pounding. "Because when you turned 18 and aged out of the foster system, you got married. You became Elena Morales. The investigators were looking for Elena Reyes. And there are thousands of Elena Reyeses in the country, but you weren't one of them anymore. You were hidden in plain sight under a different name." The irony was devastating. Elena thought about all the times she'd kept her married name after Miguel died. Even though some of her friends had suggested changing it back, she'd kept it because it was her daughter's name, because it was the name of the man she'd loved, because starting over with her maiden name had felt like erasing the good parts of her life along with the painful ones. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I never thought. How could you have known?" Mateo cut her off. "This isn't your fault. It's mine. I should have looked harder. I should have come back to Ashford myself, walked every street, looked in every window. But I was a coward. I was afraid of what I'd find. Afraid you'd be gone, or angry, or worse, that you wouldn't remember me. Not remember you? Elena's voice broke. Mateo, you were my whole world. After Mama died and they split us up, all I could think about was protecting you. When you disappeared, a part of me died. I named my daughter Sophia because it was Mama's middle name, but her middle name is Mateo. Sophia Mateo Morales. Because I wanted to keep you with me somehow. Mateo put his head in his hands and wept. These were not quiet tears but deep, shuddering sobs that seemed to come from the very core of him. Elena held him again, this stranger who was her brother, and let him cry out 30 years of guilt and grief. Old Joe appeared beside the table with 2 fresh cups of coffee and a slice of apple pie with 2 forks. He set them down without a word and walked away, but not before giving Elena's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Eat, Elena said softly, pushing the pie toward Mateo. You're too thin. He laughed through his tears. You sound like Richard. He was always trying to feed me. They shared the pie in silence, and with each bite, Elena studied her brother's face. She could see the boy he'd been in the man he'd become. The way he chewed on the right side of his mouth. The way his left eyebrow lifted slightly when he was thinking. The way he sat with his shoulders curved inward, as if still trying to make himself small and invisible. Tell me about your life, Elena said finally. Everything. I want to know everything. So Mateo talked. He told her about those early years on the streets, sleeping in doorways and dumpster diving for food. About the night Richard found him. How the old man had taken one look at him and seen something worth saving. About learning to cook in that tiny restaurant kitchen, starting with washing dishes and eventually working every station until he could run the whole operation himself. Richard never asked about my past, Mateo said. He told me that in his family, in Chinese culture, there was a concept called yuan fun, the idea that everything happens according to fate and that we're connected to certain people across lifetimes. He said he knew the moment he saw me that we were meant to find each other. He sounds like a wonderful man, Elena said. He was. He had lost his own son years before to gang violence. I think maybe I filled that hole for him, and he definitely filled one for me. Mateo traced patterns in the condensation on his water glass. He taught me more than just cooking. He taught me discipline, respect, how to manage money, how to treat people with dignity. Everything I am, everything I've built, it's because of him. And when did the restaurants start growing? Richard's restaurant was in a rough neighborhood, but I had an idea. I started staying open later, past midnight, and I created a menu specifically for people coming off late shifts. Factory workers, nurses, taxi drivers. Cheap, filling food that felt like home. Word spread. We went from barely scraping by to having a line out the door every night. Mateo's eyes lit up as he talked about the work, and Elena could see the passion there. When I turned 20, Richard made me a partner. By 25, we'd opened 3 more locations. Each one had the same philosophy. Good food, fair prices, dignity for everyone who walked through the door. We hired ex-cons, recovering addicts, people aging out of foster care. We gave them the chances nobody else would. That's beautiful, Elena said. And she meant it. Richard died before he could see how big it got. Heart attack, sudden. One day he was there, and the next. Mateo swallowed hard. I almost gave up then, almost sold everything. But I kept hearing his voice telling me that the work was bigger than us, that we were building something that mattered. So you kept going. I kept going. And somewhere along the way it became massive. Investment firms wanted in. Franchises across the country, then internationally. I went from being a kid who slept in alleys to being on Forbes lists and giving TED Talks. But none of it felt real, Elena. None of it mattered because I was alone. Elena thought about her own life, so different and yet parallel in its loneliness. I wasn't completely alone, she said. I had Sophia. But I know what you mean about feeling incomplete. Tell me about her, Mateo said eagerly. My niece. What's she like? Elena's face transformed when she talked about her daughter. She's brilliant, strong, so much stronger than I ever was. She wants to be a forensic accountant, if you can believe that. She sees the world in numbers and patterns. She's nothing like me. She's exactly like you, Matteo said. You see the world in terms of who needs help, who needs feeding, who needs kindness. That takes a different kind of brilliance. Elena pulled out her phone, which was old and cracked but functional, and showed him photos. Sophia at her high school graduation. Sophia at her library job, surrounded by books. Sophia making pancakes in their tiny apartment kitchen. She looks like Mama, Matteo said, his voice thick. She does. She has her spirit too, fierce and independent. After Miguel died, I fell apart for a while. I was drowning in grief and bills, and I didn't know how we'd make it. Sophia was only 5, but she became my reason to get up every morning. I'd look at her, and I'd think, she deserves better. She deserves everything. So I'd put on my uniform and come here and smile and serve and survive. You did more than survive. You raised an amazing daughter. I did my best, Elena said simply. But it wasn't easy. There were times I had to choose between keeping the heat on or buying her winter coat. Times I ate crackers for dinner so she could have a full meal. Times I worked double shifts and missed her school plays and soccer games because we needed the money. Matteo's jaw clenched. While I was building an empire, you were struggling to survive. If I had found you sooner... Stop, Elena said firmly. You can't think like that. We both did what we had to do with what we had. You survived. I survived. We're here now. That's what matters. But even as she said it, Elena felt the weight of all those years pressing down on her. All those nights she'd cried into her pillow, exhausted and scared. All those times she'd smiled through pain because her daughter needed her to be strong. All those moments she'd looked at other families, intact, secure, comfortable, and wondered what she'd done wrong to deserve such hardship. What time do you get off work? Matteo asked, checking his watch. Elena glanced at the clock above the counter. Not for another 4 hours. My shift ends at midnight. I'll wait. Matteo, you don't have to. I've waited 30 years. I can wait 4 more hours. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. Besides, I'd like to see you work. I want to understand your life. So Matteo stayed. He moved to a different table when other customers needed the corner booth, and he ordered dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the same meal their mother used to make when she had the energy and the money. He watched as Elena moved through the diner with practiced efficiency, saw how she remembered every regular's usual order, how she slipped extra fries to the truck driver who was trying to save money, how she listened patiently to the elderly woman at table 5 who just wanted someone to talk to. Around 9 o'clock, a man came in who was clearly drunk. He was loud and belligerent, demanding service and making crude comments. Elena handled him with calm firmness, offering coffee and bread, speaking to him like a human being rather than a problem to be solved. When he couldn't pay, she told him the meal was on the house and called him a cab. Why did you do that? Martha asked after the man had left. He was horrible to you. Because he's somebody's son, Elena said quietly. Maybe somebody's father. And he's hurting. Drunk people are usually just hurt people trying to numb the pain. Matteo heard this exchange, and something in his chest cracked open. This was who his sister was. Someone who saw humanity in everyone, who led with compassion even when it wasn't deserved, who gave from a place of scarcity because she understood what it meant to have nothing. At 11, a young woman came in with 2 small children. They were wet from the rain and obviously poor. The children's clothes were too small, their shoes held together with duct tape. The woman looked exhausted and defeated. Elena seated them in the corner booth, the same one where Matteo had sat earlier. She brought coloring books and crayons for the children, then took the woman's order for 3 small meals. Matteo watched as Elena went to the kitchen. She came back with 3 full plates heaping with food. Not the small portions the woman had ordered, but generous servings of everything. When the woman protested, looking at the prices on the menu with panic, Elena waved her off. Manager's special tonight, Elena said with a warm smile. Everything's half off after 10. And these little ones look like they've been so good. I think they deserve some ice cream, don't you? The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." "I know exactly what it means," Elena said softly. "I've been where you are. It gets better. I promise it gets better." After the woman and children left, full, warm, and smiling, Mateo approached Elena at the counter. "That woman didn't know about any manager's special, did she?" Elena grinned. "There's no such thing. But old Joe doesn't mind. He's got a soft heart under all that gruff exterior. And I'll pay the difference out of my tips if I have to." "You'd give away your own money?" "It's just money, Mateo. Those kids were hungry." Elena said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Mateo thought about the money in his accounts, numbers so large they'd become abstract. He thought about his penthouse apartments and private jets and investment portfolios. And he thought about his sister, who had so little but gave so much, who understood the true value of things in a way he'd forgotten. Midnight came, and Elena hung up her apron. Her feet ached, and her back screamed in protest as she straightened up. But she smiled at Mateo as they walked out into the rain together. "My car's this way," Elena said, pointing to an old Honda with a dented bumper. "Actually," Mateo said, "I was hoping we could talk more. Can I give you a ride home? My driver's just around the corner." "Your driver?" A black sedan pulled up, sleek and expensive, looking wildly out of place on the rain-slicked streets of this neighborhood. A man in a suit jumped out with an umbrella, holding it over Mateo and Elena. "Mrs. Morales," the driver said with a respectful nod. "I'm James. It's an honor to meet you. Mr. Chun has told me so much about you." Elena looked at Mateo in confusion. "You've told him about me?" "I tell everyone about you," Mateo said quietly. "You're my hero, Elena. You always have been." The interior of the car was like nothing Elena had ever experienced. Soft leather seats, ambient lighting, and a silence so complete it felt like they'd entered another world. She ran her hand over the armrest, marveling at the smooth wood finish. "This is your life now?" she asked, looking at Mateo. "This is one small part of it," he admitted. "But it's not really my life. It's just things, comfort, convenience. None of it means anything without people to share it with." James drove them through the rain-soaked streets of Ashford. Elena watched the familiar landscape pass by, the laundromat where she washed clothes every Sunday, the bodega where she bought discounted produce, the community center where Sophia had learned to play basketball on a hoop with a bent rim. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Wherever you want," Mateo said. "I just want more time with you. We can go to your apartment or a coffee shop or just drive. I don't care, as long as we're together." Elena thought about her apartment, the tiny one-bedroom she shared with Sophia, with its leaking faucet and the radiator that clanged all night. She thought about bringing her billionaire brother there and felt a wave of shame that immediately made her angry at herself. There was no shame in poverty when you were doing your best. "Let's go to Riverside Park," she said. "There's a covered pavilion there. We can talk." The park was empty at this hour, the rain keeping everyone away. James parked nearby, and Mateo insisted he stay in the car to stay dry. He and Elena walked to the pavilion, their footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. They sat on a bench, watching the rain create patterns on the river's surface. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I need to ask you something," Elena said finally. "Why did you come to the diner tonight? How did you even know I worked there?" Mateo pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. It was grainy, clearly taken from across the street, a shot of Elena serving coffee through the diner window. "I hired a new investigator 3 months ago, younger, more creative in his approach. He didn't just search databases. He went old school, started calling every business in Ashford, asking if anyone knew an Elena who would be in her late 30s, who might have been in foster care as a child." Mateo's voice was tight with emotion. "Someone at the community center mentioned that one of the kids' mothers used to be in foster care. They didn't know your last name, but they knew you worked at Mercy's Diner. So you came to find me. I flew in from Tokyo yesterday. I've been sitting in hotels trying to work up the courage. I must have walked past the diner a dozen times, looking through the window, watching you work. I kept thinking about what I'd say, how I'd introduce myself. Would you recognize me? Would you want to see me? Would you forgive me for abandoning you? You didn't abandon me, Elena said fiercely. You were a child. You did what you had to do to survive. I could have tried to contact you once I was successful, once I had resources, but I was ashamed, Elena, ashamed of running away, ashamed that I'd built this life while you were struggling, ashamed that I'd let so much time pass. Elena took his hand. I understand shame. I understand it intimately. There's shame in being poor in a world that equates worth with wealth. Shame in not being able to give your child everything she deserves. Shame in working as hard as you possibly can and still barely staying afloat. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Neither do you. We survived, Matteo. We both survived. Different paths, same destination. We're here, together, now. They sat in silence, processing 30 years of separation in the space of a few hours. What happens now? Matteo asked quietly. What do you mean? I mean, I have resources. I can help you. I want to help you. He turned to face her fully. Let me pay off your debts. Let me buy you a house. Let me set up a trust fund for Sophia's education. Let me. Stop, Elena said, pulling her hand away. Just stop. Matteo looked stricken. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I just want to make your life easier. I know you do, and I appreciate it, I really do. But you can't just swoop in and fix everything with money. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. I've built a life, Matteo. It's not the life I imagined when I was young, but it's mine. I've earned every piece of it through hard work and sacrifice. If you take that away, who am I? You're my sister. You're an amazing mother. You're a good person who deserves better than working herself to exhaustion in a diner. Maybe I deserve better. But maybe the work has meaning beyond just survival. Maybe it's taught me things about myself, about humanity, that I wouldn't have learned in an easier life. Elena looked out at the rain. Every person I serve, I see myself in them. I see their struggles, their hopes, their basic human need to be treated with dignity. That job you think I should quit has given me purpose. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm approaching this all wrong. You're approaching it with love. That's not wrong. But maybe we need to take this slower. We have time now. We have the rest of our lives. Tell me what you need, Matteo said. Not what I think you need. What you actually need. Elena considered this carefully. I need to not worry about Sophia's education. Community college is what we can afford, but she dreams of going to a 4-year university, maybe even graduate school. That weighs on me, knowing that her potential is limited by my bank account. Consider it done. Full ride, wherever she wants to go. And I need to not panic every time the car makes a weird noise or the rent goes up $50. I need a cushion. Not luxury, just security. How about this? Matteo proposed. I set up a trust fund in your name. Enough to cover emergencies, to give you options, to let you breathe. But you keep working if you want to work. You keep your apartment if you want to keep it. You maintain control over your own life. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. That's more than generous. It's nothing. It's the bare minimum of what I should be doing for my sister. Matteo's voice cracked. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, Elena. Let me use some of it to make sure you never have to choose between heat and food again. Let me take away just that one anxiety. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay, thank you. They embraced again, and this time it felt different. Not desperate and grieving, but hopeful and healing. I want you to meet Sophia, Elena said. She's going to lose her mind when she finds out about you. I want that too, more than anything. She's working the late shift at the library tonight, but she'll be home by 1. We could go to the apartment, wait for her there. Matteo checked his watch. It's 12:30 now. Perfect timing. They drove through the sleeping city, James navigating the streets with practiced ease. Elena directed them to her building. A 4-story walk-up with peeling paint and a front door that never quite latched properly. "This is it," she said, trying to see it through Mateo's eyes and hating the judgment she imagined there. But Mateo just nodded. "I lived in places much worse than this. At least you have 4 walls and a lock on the door." They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, Elena's keys jingling in her hand. The hallway smelled like someone's dinner, beans and rice, probably Mrs. Rodriguez in 3B. The fluorescent light on the 2nd floor was out again, leaving that stretch in darkness. Elena unlocked her door and flipped on the light, revealing her home in all its humble glory. The living room was tiny, dominated by a worn couch and a television that only worked if you hit it just right. But it was clean, and there were signs of love everywhere. Photographs on the walls, Sophia's awards from school displayed on a bookshelf made from cinder blocks and plan. KS. A crocheted blanket that Miguel's mother had made them draped over the couch. "It's small," Elena said, "but it's home." Mateo walked slowly through the space, taking everything in. He paused at the photographs. Sophia at various ages, Elena and Miguel on their wedding day looking impossibly young and happy. A faded picture of their mother that Elena had managed to keep through all the moves and upheavals of her life. "You kept Mama's picture," he said softly, touching the frame. "Of course I did. She loved us, even when she couldn't show it properly. Even when the addiction was stronger than she was." Mateo picked up another photo, the same one he'd shown Elena at the diner, the Christmas picture with the 2 of them grinning at the camera. "You kept this too. I've carried that picture with me everywhere I've gone. Through every foster home, every apartment, every stage of my life. You were always with me, Mateo. Always." The sound of keys in the lock made them both turn. The door opened, and Sophia Morales walked in. Her backpack slung over one shoulder, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun. She was beautiful in that effortless way of young women who don't yet realize their own power. She stopped short when she saw the stranger in their living room. "Mom? What's going on? Who's this?" Elena's face lit up with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "Sophia, baby, I need you to sit down. I have something incredible to tell you." Sophia's eyes narrowed suspiciously as she dropped her backpack and perched on the arm of the couch. "You're freaking me out. Is everything okay?" "Everything's more than okay." Elena reached for Mateo's hand, pulling him forward. "Sophia, this is Mateo. My brother. Your uncle." Sophia's mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. "Uncle Mateo? The one who... But you said he was gone. You said you'd looked everywhere." "I did look everywhere. And now he's found me." Elena was crying again. Happy tears this time. "He walked into the diner tonight, and it's really him, Sophia. It's really him." Sophia stood slowly, her analytical mind clearly working to process this information. She studied Mateo's face, and Elena could see the moment recognition clicked into place. "You look like the picture," she said. "The Christmas one Mom keeps by her bed." "Your mom showed me pictures of you," Mateo said, his voice gentle. "You're even more impressive in person." "I don't understand," Sophia said, looking between them. "Where have you been? Why didn't you contact us before?" "That's a long story," Mateo said. "One I'd love to tell you, if you'll let me." Sophia crossed her arms, defensive in the way of young people protecting their mothers. "Mom's been through enough. I need to know you're not going to hurt her. I need to know this is real and not some scam." "Sophia," Elena said, shocked, but Mateo held up a hand. "No, she's right to be protective. You've taken care of your mother. That's good. That's exactly what you should do." He met Sophia's challenging gaze steadily. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because I've been searching for my sister for 5 years, and I finally found her. I want to be part of her life. Part of both your lives, if you'll let me." "Prove you're really her brother," Sophia demanded. Mateo thought for a moment. "When your mom was 7 and I was 5, we lived with our mother in an apartment above a pizza place. Your mom used to sneak me slices that had been thrown out, and we'd eat them cold while sitting on the fire escape. She told me stories about how one day we'd have our own house with a big kitchen, and we'd make pizza whenever we wanted." Elena gasped. I'd forgotten about that. I never forgot. Every detail of our time together is burned into my memory. Mateo's eyes were bright with unshed tears. When we were separated, I was sent to the Hendersons, and your mom went to the Bishops. She wrote me letters every week, even though the social workers told her I'd probably never get them. She drew pictures of us together, of the life we'd have when we were reunited. Sophia's defensive posture softened slightly. Mom still draws sometimes, when she's stressed. Mostly flowers and houses. She was always good at art, Mateo said with a sad smile. She deserved to go to art school to develop that talent. Instead, she had to survive. Okay, Sophia said finally. Okay, I believe you. But I still don't understand where you've been all this time. They settled onto the couch, the three of them squeezed together in the small space, and Mateo told his story again. This time he included more details, the fear and loneliness of those early years, the kindness of strangers who helped him, the grueling work that built his empire, the aching hole where his family should have been. Sophia listened with rapt attention, her sharp mind picking up on details. Wait, you said Chen's Table? The restaurant chain. That's mine. Well, it was Richard's first, but now it's mine. Sophia's eyes went wide. Mom, do you know who he is? Chen's Table is worth billions. They're in every major city. There's one downtown that I walk past sometimes, and the line is always around the block. I know, Elena said quietly. And you're really? Sophia looked at Mateo with new understanding. You're really that Chen? I am. But right now I'm just Mateo. Your uncle. Your mom's brother. That's all that matters. Sophia sat back processing this. Then, in typical pragmatic fashion, she asked, so what happens now? Are you going to want us to move? To change our lives? Because I'm in the middle of a semester, and I can't just. Nobody's changing anything they don't want to change, Mateo assured her. I'm not here to disrupt your life. I'm here to be part of it, in whatever way works for you. He's offered to help with your college, Elena said softly. Your real college, Sophia. Whatever school you want to attend. Sophia's breath caught. But that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can't accept that. Why not? Mateo asked. You're my niece. Your family. Helping family isn't charity. It's what we're supposed to do for each other. But we just met you. That doesn't change the fact that we're blood. That I've missed 20 years of your life and want to be part of the next 20, 40, 60 years. Mateo leaned forward. Your mom told me you want to be a forensic accountant. That's remarkable. You're going to do amazing things, Sophia. Let me help make sure finances aren't the thing that holds you back. Sophia looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. I told him the same thing you're feeling, that we've built our lives ourselves, that we don't need charity. But this isn't charity, baby. This is family taking care of family. I need to think about it, Sophia said. But Elena could see the hope dawning in her daughter's eyes, the possibility of a future without the crushing weight of student loans, without having to work 2 jobs while studying, without having to limit her dreams to what their budget could afford. Take all the time you need, Mateo said. I'm not going anywhere. They talked until 3 in the morning. Mateo asked Sophia about her studies, her goals, her life. Sophia, warming up gradually, told him about her accounting classes, her job at the library, her volunteer work teaching financial literacy to high school students. You're teaching financial literacy? Mateo asked, impressed. It's something I wish someone had taught me when I was younger, Sophia said. So many people don't understand basic concepts. Budgeting, credit, savings. I work with kids from low-income families, showing them how to avoid the traps that keep people in poverty. That's exactly the kind of program we run at Chen's Table, Mateo said excitedly. We offer financial literacy courses to all our employees. We help them set up savings accounts, understand their taxes, plan for the future. Really? Sophia leaned forward, her interest piqued. How do you structure the curriculum? They dove into a conversation about financial education that Elena couldn't entirely follow. But she didn't mind. She sat back and watched her brother and her daughter connect, watched them discover shared passions and values, watched the beginning of a relationship she'd never dared to hope for. Around 4, Sophia's eyes started drooping. She had class at 9 and needed sleep. She stood, stretching, then surprised everyone by walking over to Matteo and hugging him. "I'm glad you found us," she said simply. "Mom's been sad for a long time. Maybe now she won't be." After Sophia went to bed in the tiny bedroom they shared, Elena pulled out the couch into a bed and found clean sheets. "You can sleep here," she said. "It's not much, but it's perfect," Matteo said. "Better than perfect. I'm in my sister's home, under the same roof as my family. That's worth more than any 5-star hotel." Elena hesitated at the bedroom door. "Matteo, thank you for not giving up, for finding us. Thank you for being the person you are," he replied. "For staying kind despite everything. For raising an incredible daughter. For keeping my memory alive." That night, Elena lay in bed next to her sleeping daughter and thought about the strange turns life could take. This morning she'd woken up as she always did, worried about bills, tired from work, resigned to a life of just barely enough. Tonight, she was going to sleep knowing her brother was alive, that help was finally here, that maybe, just maybe, things were going to get better. In the living room, Matteo lay awake on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling and thinking about second chances, about how close he'd come to never finding Elena, never meeting Sophia, never having this moment, about how much time they'd lost and how precious every moment going forward would be. He thought about Richard, about what the old man would say if he could see this. Richard had always told him that money was just a tool, that its only value was in what you could build with it. Build relationships, build community, build legacy, Richard used to say. Those are the only things that last. Tomorrow, Matteo decided he would start building. Not restaurants or corporations, but something far more important. A relationship with his sister, with his niece, with the family he'd lost and found again. The rain had stopped, and through the window, Matteo could see the first hints of dawn coloring the sky. A new day, a new beginning. Finally, after 30 years of searching in one way or another, he was home. Elena Morales had spent 15 years as a waitress at Mercy's Diner in Ashford, a working-class neighborhood where survival was a daily struggle. A single mother to her brilliant daughter Sophia, Elena knew poverty intimately, the kind that makes you choose between medicine and groceries, that keeps you awake at night calculating which bills you can delay, that turns every unexpected expense into a potential catastrophe. Her life was defined by relentless work and quiet sacrifice. She raised Sophia alone, working double shifts and stretching every dollar until it screamed. Despite the exhaustion and financial strain, Elena maintained something precious: her kindness. She remembered her regulars' birthdays, asked truck drivers about their families, and treated everyone who walked through the diner's doors with dignity and respect. What Elena's neighbors and co-workers didn't know was that she carried a deeper wound, one that had nothing to do with money. 30 years earlier, Elena and her younger brother Matteo had been separated by the foster care system after their parents died. She was 11, he was 7, and despite her desperate promises to find him, they were torn apart and scattered to different homes. For 3 decades, Elena carried the guilt of that broken promise like a stone in her chest. Then one ordinary day, everything changed. A well-dressed man walked into Mercy's Diner and sat in Elena's section. When he looked up at her, recognition flashed in his eyes, not as a customer recognizing a waitress, but something far deeper. This stranger was Matteo Chen, now a successful restaurateur and billionaire, and he had spent years searching for the sister he'd never forgotten. The reunion was emotional and complicated. Matteo had built an empire from nothing, creating the Chen's Table restaurant chain through relentless work and business acumen. He'd achieved extraordinary financial success, but he'd never stopped looking for Elena. When he finally found her, he discovered a sister who had remained kind despite decades of hardship, who had raised an exceptional daughter while working herself to exhaustion, who had never lost her compassion even when life gave her every reason to become bitter. Matteo's arrival in Ashford disrupted Elena's life in ways both wonderful and difficult. He didn't try to change who she and Sophia were, he simply showed up. He attended Sophia's accounting study groups, sat at the diner counter chatting with regulars, helped neighbors carry groceries, and integrated himself into their community. But his presence brought undeniable changes. The trust fund Matteo established gave Elena something she'd never had: financial security. Not wealth, but enough to stop the constant panic about bills. For Sophia, the transformation was even more dramatic. With Matteo's help, she gained access to educational consultants and began applying to elite business schools. Institutions Elena had never let her daughter even dream about because they seemed impossibly out of reach. When Columbia University accepted Sophia, the young woman faced a crisis of confidence. She'd excelled at community college, but could she compete with privileged Ivy League students? Would she fit in? Would people look down on her? Elena and Matteo helped her understand that her perspective, forged through struggle, was valuable, that understanding hardship made her stronger, not weaker. But acceptance came with unexpected costs. As word spread about Elena's billionaire brother, the social dynamics in her community shifted uncomfortably. Martha, a fellow waitress, grew hostile, suggesting Elena no longer belonged among working people. Neighbors who'd been friendly became distant. Sophia's study group friends treated her differently after her Columbia acceptance. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, Elena's upstairs neighbor, stopped inviting her for coffee. Elena found herself in a strange liminal space, still working the same job, living in the same apartment, facing the same daily challenges, yet suddenly perceived as someone who had it easy. The guilt was crushing. She felt like a traitor for accepting help when others continued to struggle, like she was abandoning her community even though nothing about her circumstances had fundamentally changed. During one conversation on Elena's fire escape, the same spot where she and Matteo had eaten cold pizza as children, her brother offered a simple solution to her guilt. Don't leave them behind. Help them. Together, they envisioned something transformative. A community center designed not by wealthy outsiders imposing their vision of what poor people needed, but by someone who had lived that struggle and understood it intimately. Elena began conceptualizing a space that would offer job training, GED classes, financial literacy workshops, affordable childcare, fresh food access, computer resources, and basic healthcare. Critically, it wouldn't be pure charity. Services would operate on sliding scales, preserving dignity while providing support. The idea terrified Elena. She was just a waitress with no credentials or experience running such an organization. But Matteo helped her see that her real-world understanding of poverty was more valuable than any degree. She knew what people actually needed because she'd been them. She wouldn't make the mistakes well-intentioned outsiders typically made when designing programs for communities they didn't understand. As Elena wrestled with the decision, support emerged from unexpected places. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, who ran the Ashford Community Health Initiative, offered to partner on healthcare services. A retired teacher volunteered for GED classes. Local business people offered to teach job skills. Even Frank Sullivan, the diner owner, encouraged Elena to take this opportunity, acknowledging that she could do far more good running a community center than serving coffee. The decision crystallized during a family meeting with Sophia and Matteo. Her daughter reminded her that Elena had spent a lifetime taking care of others informally, helping neighbors navigate bureaucracy, organizing food drives, connecting people with resources. The community center would simply formalize and expand what she'd always done naturally. Elena gave notice at the diner, and her final 2 weeks revealed how deeply she'd touched people's lives. Regulars shared stories of small kindnesses Elena barely remembered. Birthday pie for a widow, questions about a trucker's daughter, conversations that made people feel human and valued. Even Martha apologized for her hostility, admitting jealousy had blinded her to Elena's genuine goodness. Finding the right location took careful consideration. Matteo wanted something large and impressive, but Elena insisted on starting smaller and more accessibly. They settled on a former grocery store in the heart of the neighborhood, accessible by bus, large enough for multiple programs, but not so fancy that people would feel intimidated or unwelcome. The renovation became a jobs program before the center even opened. Elena insisted that unemployed neighborhood residents work alongside professional contractors, learning skills while earning wages. Carlos, a laid-off factory worker, discovered a talent for carpentry. Marie, a single mother, trained in electrical work. The building itself became a metaphor for transformation. Sophia contributed by developing financial literacy curricula specifically for people the banking system had historically exploited. Dr. Okonkwo designed healthcare services. A diverse planning committee came together, educators, social workers, clergy, community leaders, all working to create something genuinely responsive to neighborhood needs. But challenges emerged. A critical newspaper article questioned whether this was genuine community support or the first step toward gentrification that would eventually displace longtime residents. The skepticism was painful but understandable. Poor communities had heard promises before from wealthy outsiders who ultimately served their own interests. Elena and Matteo responded with transparency and humility. They held a community forum where nearly 200 people came to ask hard questions. Elena spoke from the heart about being one of them, about understanding their struggles because she'd lived them, about designing the center to empower rather than change people. Slowly, skepticism softened into cautious hope. 3 months later, the Ashford Community Resource Center opened its doors to overwhelming response. Families lined up for early childhood programs. Adults enrolled in classes and job training. The small training cafe served affordable meals while teaching food service skills. Dr. Okonkwo's clinic saw 30 patients on opening day. Sophia's financial literacy classes filled immediately. The computer lab stayed open late, filled with people connecting with opportunities. Elena walked through the center that first day, watching her vision come to life. Carlos was teaching carpentry to teenagers. Marie worked as assistant facilities manager while continuing her training. People who'd been invisible were finding purpose, community, and hope. Late that evening, exhausted but exhilarated, Elena sat with Matteo in the quiet cafe. Sophia had called to say she wanted to intern at the center the following summer. Colombia was great, but this was where real change happened. Matteo reminded Elena of something his late mentor Richard used to say: "Success isn't measured in dollars, but in how many people are better off because you existed." By that measure, Elena had always been successful. Now she just had a bigger platform. Elena acknowledged the challenges ahead, inevitable mistakes, continued skepticism, hard work. But none of that frightened her anymore. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't merely surviving. She was thriving. More importantly, she was helping others do the same. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its evening rhythm. But something had fundamentally changed. Now there was a place where anyone could walk in and find help, hope, and the dignity that comes from being truly seen and valued. Elena had spent her life serving others as a waitress. Now she was still serving, but in a way that created lasting change. And her brother, once lost and now found, stood beside her in this mission. Their story wasn't just about reunion. It was about redemption, resilience, and the radical power of choosing compassion over bitterness. It was proof that broken things can be mended, that lost things can be found, and that the most meaningful success comes from lifting others up. Thank you for experiencing Elena and Matteo's incredible journey with us. If this story of reunion, resilience, and community transformation moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and leave a comment telling us which part of Elena's journey resonated most deeply with you. Remember, we all have the power to make someone's day brighter, whether through a kind word, a generous act, or simply by seeing the humanity in everyone we meet. Subscribe now, and let's continue exploring stories that remind us of the best of what we can be. Until next time, take care of each other.